Well, I asked for some help on the last video about how I would finish the corner here because it didn't look right. Now I managed to get a photo sent to me by Jeff on the E Type forum, UK E Type forum, which showed me what the finished joint should look like in this area, and it doesn't look anything like the way I've done it. So the mistake was mine when I made the corner here. I thought that somehow the way to seal the area was to fold part of this panel up, but in fact that's not the way it was done. So what I've done, and I've started on the other side, is to reconstruct this corner. I'll just show that now. So what it should have looked like is this. This panel comes straight across to there, and the other side of it, let's pull that down, this comes across here, and the panel that goes in here just sits on top of this, and then on the other side it welds to that flat section there. So what I've done is I've actually reconstructed the corner here, and while I was at it I've actually cut this section off and re-welded it. So I actually had this flange going all the way to the corner. So the advantage of metal is you can fix up your mistakes just by cutting pieces off and refabricating and re-welding. So it's taken a bit of time to get that done, but it's now in the right shape. Everything sits in there neatly, and I should be able to get a pretty good seal along here when I've welded it. So having reconstructed that, now I'm going to tech screw this side in place so I can basically set it up for welding. When I repaired this panel, I did fit it against the body and ensure that the fit was pretty much right, but you actually can't finalise it until you've got everything in place. So what I'm now doing is doing the final weld fit. The difficulties are that you're trying to match all different surfaces. You've got to get a good match along the boot, along the rear of the inner guard, on this flange, in and around this flange, and then the outer flange. Oh, and I forgot the one at the rear. So you've got to actually be able to get it to fit all of those. Now, the final fit, which is what I'm doing now, is aimed to do that. Apart from rebuilding this, it's taken me quite a few hours just to adjust slightly all of these flanges so everything fits. Now it's getting very, very close. I've got some guidelines along the bottom here where the original spot welds were drilled out. I can line those up. They're lining up quite well. It's now fitting a lot better along the edge here, and it's taken a bit of tweaking to get the fit around here. Now I can force fit it, but what I'm aiming to do is to get it fit fairly loosely. You can always clamp things down hard, which will stretch things a little bit, but that tends to pull things out of shape. So So I want to get it as close as I can, basically sitting in there by hand. And as I say, it's very close to that now. Just a little bit of tweaking on this bottom corner, not much. It's a couple of millimetres out, so I want to be able to have that sit down a little bit better. So I'm getting very close. Probably need to shrink this a little bit more along there. It's need a bit of shrinkage in there just to fit this shape. I want to make sure it fits close. Once again, I could always pull that down with a tech screw and then weld it, but it feels a little bit raised, so I need to drop that down. But it's getting very, very close. Not far off putting the tech screws in this, so it could be welded. I've got the panel fitting in most places. Fitting well in here, along the top. A little bit of modification in there. It's very close now. Along the boot floor, that's fine. But the problem I've got at this stage is just inside here. Just with the flange, and it's between probably there and there, just the curve in here. It's just not quite touching this outer panel. So I'll take everything off and I'll just modify that. It's just got to come down. It's not that much, but it's not quite touching. I'd rather it touch or get close to touching, so I can then drill the plug weld holes and put some tech screws in. Down here that will touch, that's just sitting there, that's not a problem. That will just, those two pieces will meet. They're about 1.5 millimetres apart. So they're close, but just in here I've got to modify a bit. So I'll take it all off and reshape that. Now, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. The alternative is putting the plug welds in. There would still be a slight gap between the inner guard and this outer panel, which you could fill with sealer, but I'd rather not rely on sealer. I'd rather have the two panels meeting, and I'll still use sealer anyway, but I really don't want a gap filled with body sealer. I mean, there's enough of that in and around here where they've put sealer in gaps, and gaps here they've got sealer in. But I'd rather seal it up if I can. So I'll just take all this off and try and modify the curve on the inner guard. The panel is now about 95% fitted, enough to go start working on the other side. The flanges are now fitting well. I haven't got all the tech screws in, but I've got enough to hold it in place. I've probably just got to tap this flange on the inside down a fraction, and I'll do that from the inside of the guard. I'll do it up in through here. That's got to come down a little bit. This piece here, which I always wondered about before, will actually be cut off, and there's a flange underneath that, and it sort of goes across that way. So this piece will be cut off once it's welded. Anyway, it's in. Just a little bit of work to do, a little bit of shrinking up on here, not much. And I'll make sure the panel is nice and smooth, which it appears to be. make sure I haven't buckled it when I put it in. Feels right. So anyway, that's done enough now to move on to the other side. It won't take long to finish that off, ready for welding. I mean, I've got to take it off anyway again, because once again I'll seal the steel up inside, put weld through primer on the flanges and and some zinc rich paint in around the inside there. So all that's got to be done yet before I weld, but certainly it's good enough now to leave. I've finished fitting this side. It's the one up here. Drilled all the plug weld holes, and I've also sealed up all the inside of this with high zinc paint. Same along here, I've just redone all that, touched all that up so everything's sealed up in here. Ultimately some of this will be covered in the final paint coat, but the problem I'd face is trying to actually spray into some of these areas once all these panels are in place. Some of it will just end up with overspray. Other parts that are easily seen will be sprayed in the final colour of the car. But at this stage everything's ready just to now tech screw up and then start the welding process. I've started the welding process on the right hand side of the car. Everything's tech screwed in place. What I've started to do is to do the welds along the bottom here, not all of them, just a few of them, just to make sure everything's held firmly in place. I didn't use many tech screws on this side. I basically used clamps, but it's better to get some nice welds in there to get rid of some of the clamps because they get in the way. So I won't do any more along the bottom. These welds have penetrated quite well. Very pleased with those. These are slightly smaller because of the flange. Basically they're the same size as these ones, and also those ones. The ones on the top, of course, or top, bottom, on the boot floor, they're slightly larger. The flange is much wider, and I can get a nice plug weld in there. So I've tech screwed all of that. I'll go along and I'll do alternate plugs. So that's what I'll do next. The setting on the MIG, of course, will have to be changed, but I'll do those, just the alternates. Then I'll come back and then I'll do a few more along here and do a few around here, not all of them. So I'll gradually move around and add additional plug welds until I'm ready to basically complete the whole piece. But there's a lot of welds to do, but it's looking quite nice at the moment. For such a small piece, this takes an enormous amount of time to both fit and weld. I've been welding over 2 days. Okay, not all day, every day, but 5 hours, 6 hours welding this in. There's close to 90 plug welds. There's a lot of seam welds. I've also put a few brazes on joints where they were originally, up in there and some down there. Also put a little bit of braze up in there just to block a small hole off in the corner. But it's now in, and everything and quite solid. Enormously tight when all this welds in. So the floor is all welded to this. Haven't done the other side yet. I might rest for a day or so. As I say, it takes a long time for such a small piece, and I think, as I've said before, there are so many different flanges to weld. It's one thing to line them up, and then it's another thing to progressively weld around. So I didn't just weld straight down one seam. I did alternates there and alternates here, alternates there, alternates there, alternates there, and then gradually filled in the gaps. That way everything seemed to go in straight. The weld in here was originally MIG. I've used TIG. It's just a little bit cleaner. Don't have to clean it up as much because it doesn't have mounds of weld on the outside, so that's all nicely done and tight. So it's getting closer to a complete body. The lower quarter panels have now both been welded in. Right hand side's all been welded, brazed and finished. The left hand side has still got a bit of work to do. Let's turn around a bit. Still got to do a bit of brazing in here, brazing in there, and I've got to do some TIG welding in the get up here. TIG welding in around here. So a little bit to do yet, but basically that's the end of the rust repairs for the body. It's now been completely rebuilt. Rust has been cut out, new metal has been put in, new panels have been put in, and it's the only thing to do with this now is to just go around carefully, finish off welds, and put seam sealer in, and then I'm going to coat it with 2-pack epoxy. So it's taken a long time to finish, but certainly probably how much, close to 2/3 of the body's had to have work done on it. So there's been a lot of work done, but it's good to finish it. I've started to clean up the rear hatch. Just got that in some vinegar wrap at the moment. I was hoping that was fine, but it did have a lot of rust under the edge of the thing, round the seal. The storage of this left a lot to be desired. I'm fairly certain it was left out in the open under a plastic tarp, but I mean that's really not the best of things. I thought the hatch was fine, but when I've taken the rust off the outside, there are a few pinholes basically in this area here and similar on the other side. So when I've finished cleaning it up, I'll then, well, certainly I've got to cut some rust out. It's just a question of how much has to be cut out. So that's probably the next job to do. But the body itself, it's pretty ready to put aside for the moment.